Hello, hello.
Anybody want to do an interpretive dance?
Wait a minute. Dave McClellan, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. Yes, you're back.
All right, so you can hear. So you are on my MacBook. So
Okay.
I'm gonna turn,
And the delay issue is now cleared up. Yeah, you're loud and clear, David.
okay. And you can, okay, Rachel, can you talk and see? Rachel's gonna talk and let's see if we can hear her.
Okay, so I'll just continue on the elections. I was almost done. And so there will be a slate of
Good.
individuals that I listed. That does not mean that someone who still would like to run, if you would like to run and have your name on the slate, then just contact me either here or by email between now and our meeting in November, on November 27th. That is when we will vote. Okay, so just let me know. And we will need, again, by bylaw, at least a third of the membership to vote on November to confirm the election. So please come or be present on November 27th. Do we have a Zoom, Grace, in November, or is it in person? Do you know?
In person.
It's in-person meeting in November, so please come. Okay, that's the first announcement. The second one is we have the upcoming annual November workshop at the club, which is a week from next Saturday, November 4th. And note that the location is changed. We are not here in the church, which we usually are. And the church had a conflict. So we are at the Nevada County Association of Realtors, which you could walk from here. It's just over there. Beautiful facility, a place called Esterly Hall. And so there's two levels. Their office is on the upper level, Esterly Hall is on the lower level. So that's where you'll want to head a week from Saturday. It starts at 9 o'clock. Could desperately use a few extra hands, 8:30 to 9 for setup. We just have 30 minutes to get set up. And we have 2 tech setups as well. So all hands will be helpful. And then we end at 2:30 and have to be out by 3. So it's a cleanup crew. So if you could come a few minutes early to move chairs, stay a few minutes late to help us clean up, that would be much appreciated. And holler at me. I'd love to write your name down so I kind of know how many folks we're going to have. It's going to be great. We've added 1 new workshop. I see Eric in the back who graciously stepped up with his crew. And it's going to be on the same topic you're going to hear from our wonderful presenter tonight, in-camera movement. So Eric, it's you, Donna, Charlotte. Indeed, yes. So in-camera movement. So that one has been added. And Kathy, as I said in the email, is hosting the generative AI workshop. And Mike Oisman can't be with us. Yes, question in the back.
Information about where it is and so on be on the site, on the camera website?
Yes, Dave Arstein today, I think, put it on the club's website. There's a link and it's also in the calendar. Okay. All right. And last one, and I will leave you. Our annual photography month exhibition at the Granucci at the Center for the Arts in Grass Valley. Submissions are due before our next meeting. So the 11/25, November 25th, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And then we have our meeting on that Monday. So we have only 7 entries right now, but I assume that's going to pick up. I'm expecting upwards of 40. So please send in your submissions if you have not already. All right. And yes, question.
Subject of the show.
Say that again, please.
Subject of energy show. Water.
Water.
Oh, it's called In Celebration of Water, black and white or color, either. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
David.
Mine is real easy. I have some brochures in the back. I have maybe 2 more spots for my Africa trip in February. So if you're interested, take a look. Let me know.
Then we have Robert, where are you?
You want to talk about it?
It's stage, it's mine. I'm gonna drag me off. Well, I've been involved with the camera club here for a few years, and I think it's a great experience for me. I've been a photographer since, oh, I don't know, Moses was a baby. And I have photographs to prove it. They're all daguerreotypes. I do have a 1-man show coming up at the Viewpoint Gallery this coming November. I'll be celebrating my 30th birthday and yeah, my first 1-man show. So hopefully this is gonna be like a retrospect of what I've done over the last 60 years. I pulled people off the street, making a living as a commercial advertising photographer had its rewards. But for me, some of the rewards as being a photographer is being able to react with somebody and capture them and provide them with a black and white image that represents them as a person on the planet. So I have about 40 images that we've narrowed down, and I really thank David for helping me with this. He kind of encouraged me to do this, and thank you. And Anne Westling has been a jewel, a new member of my crew. She's actually given me PR and encouragement. So that being said, the opening is going to be November the 4th, and there's going to be a celebration of my work on the November the 19th. I wanted to make sure I was 80 years old before this happened. And I was 80 on November the 18th. So there will be refreshments. And I'm sure I'll leave some for everybody because I gotta stop drinking. But anyway, there'll be refreshments and yes,
The opening is November 9th,
the 9th, yeah, the opening, yeah.
and then you have a second Saturday,
Yes, the second Saturday of this,
November 11th. And then you have a artist reception on
artist reception, that's the one I'm talking
the
about.
third Sunday, November
The
19th.
third Sunday. You're so great with dates, you know. And,
Robert,
Okay.
location again? Where's the location?
oh, it's at the Viewpoint Gallery in Sacramento. And I will be, well, there's some PR about it. To me, it's a big deal. My wife, it's a real big deal because, get me out of the house. Oh, yeah, that being said, I got the high sign that, thank you very much, and it's so hard to give this up. I take one home. Thank you.
All right, well, yeah.
Well, I wasn't 80 when I came in this room, but I am now. Wow, were we running a little late here? Welcome, look how many people, the room is full, the parking lot is full. Welcome to people out in Zoom land. This is great. So we're gonna just quickly go, we have 5 guests. Again, you know the drill. If you see the little sticker on them, say hi, okay. We have one new member, Daryl Starkey. Here, okay, and Guy Stilson, who signed up online yesterday. If you'll stand up for just a couple minutes, and if you say hi and explain to us what you do with photography.
Hi, my name's Guy. I've been taking photos one way or another since I was 8 years old or something like that. And I've enjoyed doing it and thought I need more encouragement to do it, so here I am.
Well, we're encouraging. See this how I feel? Okay, everybody, that's it for me right now, and enjoy the evening.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you all for your patience as we worked out the tech issues. But here we are at the main event tonight. And I'm very excited to be introducing our speaker, Stephanie Johnson. Stephanie is a self-taught creative photographer, primarily focused on intentional camera movement or ICM photography. She's always had a very strong emotional connection to art in all its forms, as well as to the natural world. And I think we'll see some of that in her work as she talks about it. She's the founder, creator, and publisher of ICM Photography Magazine, a first of its kind e-magazine dedicated solely to exploring the art of ICM through images, articles, reviews, interviews, tips, and tutorials by ICM photographers and artists around the world. So if you haven't checked this out, I encourage you to do that, ICM Photo Mag. And in addition, she leads on-location ICM retreats and workshops and is an ICM creative photography mentor. Very excited to have her with us tonight. Stephanie, welcome. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Johnson.
Well, thank you so much, Grace. I will go ahead and share my screen, and let me know if you can see it and me as well. So can you see the screen and me also?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Great.
we see the screen.
You
No.
can't see me? You
No.
can't see the speaker as well? Because I do actually show some of the
Oh, there you
camera
go.
movements as I'm talking through.
It's, yeah,
You're good. Your little tiny video on the top.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing when I'm showing the camera movements. But thank you. This is an outline of the things that I plan to talk about. I'll talk a little bit about how I came to ICM, then give a basic kind of overview of ICM and some of the different kinds of movements. I have a short fieldwork video, and then we'll also take a look at some different types of ICM images, along with some before and after examples. And so, yes, I've been primarily focused on ICM since about 2017, and it has been a way for me to connect more mindfully, actually, with my local landscape, because I had been traveling to Ireland several times over the period of about 2.5 years, and was finding it difficult to get out into the Iowa landscapes, which is where I live, after going and shooting the landscapes of Ireland quite frequently from 2015 to 2017. And so I read a book in 2017 called A Beautiful Anarchy by a Canadian photographer named David Duchemin. And in the book, David talks about this idea that you have to get out and do the work. And it's in the doing of the work that inspiration comes. And so I took that to heart and started just going out into the landscape in Iowa after seeing some ICM and thinking that I could use that to connect more meaningfully and mindfully with my local landscape. And that's kind of how I got started with ICM. So I learned to see the Iowa landscape in a completely new and different way by just getting out and moving the camera to create more emotion and feeling and moods of what I was seeing, rather than the literal interpretation of what I was seeing with my physical eyes. And so I have been primarily focused on ICM ever since. And over those several years that I've been doing it, my technique and my style have evolved quite a bit. And so as an introduction to ICM, I feel like, it is a technique, but it's more than just a technique. It's a creative process, and it's a form of artistic expression. It asks us to let go of things that we've previously learned about photography, like rules and perfectionism and sharpness and an idea of right and wrong, because with ICM, there really is no right or wrong. It's a very individual technique that helps you create very unique and individual images, and every person who comes to ICM can really have their own unique style and artistry with it. And so there's not really a right or wrong. There's no one size fits all. Whatever my settings are that work for me may not work for you necessarily. It's one of those things where you have to just get out and do the work. You have to do loads of work, and it's in that doing of the work that you will refine your processes, and you'll learn to see the potential in any given scene or situation. Just like, I learned to see the potential of the landscapes in Iowa in a much different way. And since 2017, I didn't start traveling again from 2017 until about 2022. So last year was when I first started traveling again. So most of my ICM work has been within a 30-mile radius of where I live. So I'm going to the same locations over and over and over again over a number of years, but I'm creating uniquely individual images and artistic images, even going to the same locations over and over again. And so at a basic level, ICM is a very intentional process of using camera movement during the exposure of an image. And it typically uses slower shutter speeds, and that's what helps introduce some of the blur and the movement that you see in the images. For me, ICM is about pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's about seeing the potentiality of any given scene, of seeing the possibilities. It's about creating from an inner vision more so than it is about creating from a literal physical vision of, of the literal world. In my view, it's about seeing things differently and seeing those things from your inner creative spirit. And it's more than just accidental camera shake. We've all done accidental camera shake, and accidentally shaking the camera can create some interesting results. But with ICM, there really is a very intentional and deliberate act of creation that's involved. And so if you're not comfortable shooting in manual mode, I would suggest shooting in shutter priority. I shoot in manual mode. I feel like manual mode, meaning I'm controlling the shutter speed and the aperture. I'm making adjustments to those settings as I'm working with the camera. But if you're not comfortable making those adjustments yourself, put the camera in shutter priority would be my recommendation. There are some photographers out there who suggest using aperture priority, but I don't really care what the aperture is going to be. What I want to control is the shutter speed. And so if you aren't comfortable shooting in manual mode, I think shutter priority is the next best option to be sure that you're always able to achieve the shutter speed that you want to work with. I feel like shutter speeds of about 1/15 of a second or slower are a good place to start. The first 3 years I was doing ICM, I was shooting at about 1/13 of a second. Now I'm shooting at about a half a second. And you can do ICM at 1/30 of a second or even 1/60 of a second, but you're not really able to be as intentional because you're having to move the camera really quickly at those higher shutter speeds. So I feel like the creative potential exists at these slower shutter speeds of about 1/10 of a second, half a second. But there are people out there who are shooting 5 seconds or 10 seconds or even up to 30 seconds. They're doing ICM with these very long extended shutter speeds as well. And so it really is this it's a matter of just playing and experimenting and exploring what is going to work for you and what's going to create the results that are pleasing to you and your own personal aesthetic. Different focal lengths will create different effects, different sizes of movements, different speeds of movements. And so, it's all really a matter of working with the camera to see what the results are going to be and how you can create images that are pleasing to you by moving the camera and trying different settings, different movements. And so these are some of the types of movements. I wouldn't say that they're all inclusive, but they're very easy to get started with, these movements on this slide. I won't go into each one individually. I have a video that's coming up on this next slide, which will show how I work with the camera in different field work environments. And then I have a series of images that we'll look through. And as we look at those, I'll also show how how I moved the camera to create the effects seen in the images. But, if you can think of a way to move the camera, try it. There's no right or wrong, and you don't lose anything. You gain much more by just trying something and seeing what happens. And if it doesn't work, just keep trying and see if you can get it to do something that you want it to do. It's really all about, ICM really is all about just experimenting and playing and exploring. And again, like I said, there's no one size fits all really. And so you have to figure out what is going to work for you individually. I can give you, and you can listen to other ICM photographers talk about their settings and their movements and things like that as kind of a starting point, but you have to really get out and do the work to figure out what's going to work for you. So we'll go ahead and have a look at this video really quick. It's about 5 minutes long, and it shows how I work with the camera in a number of different fieldwork environments. And after that, we'll have a look at some images. And hopefully you can hear it. If you can't hear it, let me know. I started working with ICM in 2017, and it very quickly became my primary focus as I learned to paint beautiful images using camera movement. With ICM, I'm able to create images which are unique to my own individual artistic vision and creative expression. This is the scene from a sunset outing at one of my favorite local spots. I use very fast, sweeping movements with the camera to create abstract images of the landscape. In the background, you can see a line of water that is not reflecting, and that is what creates the effect seen here in this view on the back of the camera and in the resulting final image. I'm always looking for these kinds of nuances in any given scene because they add visual interest and create some uniquely abstract effects with ICM. Here, you can see that I'm making adjustments to the camera settings as I work with the scene. I always shoot in manual mode and make adjustments as part of my creative process and flow. Here, I'm composing the images with the fountain just above the 1/3 mark on the grid. Even though I don't generally worry too much about composition, and especially not about the rule of thirds, I do always keep the grid lines turned on so that I can use them as reference points while shooting. In this video, I'm basically shaking the camera, kind of a shuddery, juddery movement, while incorporating a bit of left or right movement as well. This shaking movement that I'm using here created some really interesting effects, and luckily that translated once I was able to look at the images on the computer and saw that I did indeed have some really unique and intriguing images. In this scene, I'm using my long lens, which is generally my go-to lens for my ICM work. But I do also find it quite beneficial to use a shorter, wider lens in an urban environment such as this. I also usually will shoot many frames with the camera both vertically oriented and horizontally oriented. Here I'm using my shorter lens, and I'm zooming the lens while I'm moving the camera at the same time. This can also create some really intriguing, ethereal, and whimsical effects. Trees are one of my favorite subjects to capture with ICM, and I'm always looking for new ways to create something unique and different with my tree ICM images. For this image, I used a sort of wavy, vertical movement to capture waves of light, curves of light, wrapping around the trees. This is what that camera movement looked like for creating this particular tree image. Sunsets are another favorite subject of mine, and I almost always do my sunset ICM work with some sort of water feature as part of the scene. In addition to shooting in manual mode with the camera, I also use manual focus with the lens, and for a scene like this, I set the focus to the infinity mark on the lens, and then I don't need to worry about interrupting my creative flow to think about focusing. Again, my movements are very fast, sweeping movements, and I'm always watching the back of the camera to see what's going on with the images, and I just play, experiment, have fun, and enjoy the creative process while immersed in the natural world. Getting into a rhythm with my movements and seeing the streams of energy that show up on the back of the camera really enables me to connect more fully to the natural world.
as everything flows together to reveal the interconnectedness of all things. ICM really does enable me to communicate my artistic vision and to express my inner creative spirit in my own unique way.
Okay, sorry about that. So this next set of slides are going to be single exposure ICM images. I have also in the past couple of years been doing multiple exposure ICMs, and I'll talk about those after I show you this series of single exposure ICMs. And I do all of my work in camera as much as possible. I do edit my images in Lightroom, but I am not making, major edits or doing major edits to my images. I try to get as much right in camera as possible. And so when I first started going out into Iowa, into the landscape around me in Iowa, after seeing some ICM for the first time in 2017 and thinking that would be a way that I can get out with the camera, be creative, and connect with my local environment, I started going out actually with this small little compact point and shoot camera. It's the Canon G7X. It's an advanced compact point and shoot, which I can control the aperture and the shutter speed. It has an internal ND filter in it as well. And it was easy to just take this out and feel less encumbered and freer to move the camera around as I started learning and experimenting and exploring ICM. So I would take my dog for walks out into the forest and local area, and that camera was really easy for me to get started with. But eventually I did start moving, I did start using my DSLR, and so I did, I have a Canon 7D, which is a crop sensor, and then I also have a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a full frame camera. And then in December, I bought the 5D Mark IV. So I have used a number of different DSLRs from crop sensor to full frame. But this image on the left is basically just a vertical motion. So I also often like to, when I'm working with my tree images, start at the top and go down. So it's just a very smooth vertical movement from top to bottom. Going from top to bottom helps me get some of that foreground at the bottom of the tree. So it kind of feels like the trees are just rising up out of that foreground. And then it prevents getting some of the light leaks that will come through from the canopy of the trees where the leaves, where there's openings between the leaves. And so I don't generally like to get the light leaks coming through, but like you saw in the video, if I can do it in a way that creates a very smooth flow of lines, then I don't mind that. This image on the right is basically the same kind of vertical movement, but maybe with a little bit of a S curve, or maybe just one little curve in it to get some of that texture that you see on the trees from the bark, with it kind of looking like it's wrapping around that tree there in the center. These are both using an S curve type of motion. So basically, like you saw in the video, an S curve from top to bottom, but the image on the left is a looser S curve motion. So you can see that those curves are wider and looser than the image on the right, which is a very tight S curve motion. And this is one of those situations where there were light leaks coming through the canopy of the trees, but I was able to create these ribbons of light. It's what it felt like. I was creating these ribbons of light that were wrapping around the trees, and this this particular image, I would have had to underexpose it quite a bit in order to not blow out those highlights. So then I bring up the shadows in post-processing. So I do that kind of editing when I'm working in my post-processing workflow. I'm a lot of times bringing the highlights way down and the shadows way up because a lot of times I am shooting directly at the light source with my ICMs. This is just using a shaking motion. So something like this, where I'm shaking the camera, and you can see how that's represented with some of these lines that you see where the light's reflecting on the leaves in this particular scene. The shaking motion like that, it gives a little bit more of an impressionistic look and feel to it, as opposed to those very straight linear lines. And so you can tell, I mean, you can tell with these images that they are trees, and with the vertical movement, you can tell that they're trees, but because you're following the lines. But if I were to go horizontal against the lines of the trees, you might not be able to know what that they were actually trees. So this shaking, these slower and even tighter shaking motions can give a little bit more of an impressionistic look and feel to an image, so that you do see the lines of the literal subject, but it just softens it and gives it a little more of an impressionistic feel to it. So this is river rapids, and this is just waving the camera like this. So a horizontal movement, but waving the camera, and that wave is accentuated by the river rapids themselves, and it just creates this sort of waves of light. It feels like waves of light on the water there, and you can see that movement even in the green trees on the opposite side of the river in this particular scene. This is a sunset image from the local lake where I spend a lot of time, and this is basically a horizontal movement, but with a twist. So horizontal with a roll, and that roll is what creates that sort of circular effect that you see here in the center of the image. And then, you know, every sunset's going to be a little bit different and can have the potential to create a different kind of an effect, even using that same kind of movement. These are tall grasses, so they're like 18 feet tall, and they grow as part of a biofuel project here in Iowa City. And again, this is holding the camera vertically oriented, moving the camera horizontally, but rolling the camera. So horizontal with a roll. And again, you get that rotation, that circular movement. And because these grasses have feathery plumes at the top of them, that's what creates that effect that you get at the top. It looks like you can see that represented in those lines at the tops of those grasses there. This is just a waving motion. So basically up, down, and over like this. So horizontal with a little bit of a push off at the end, and again working with a sunset over a lake and just trying to catch that light before that last bit of light before the sun has gone below the horizon. And then because there's a little bit of sun still above the horizon, you can get some really interesting movement of the light as it's dragged through the frame, because that's what ICM really is in a lot of ways. It's dragging the light and color around the frame and into the frame. These two images are using a very wild, just up and over kind of movement. So something like this. And this was a fast moving storm coming in at the lake where I go to for sunsets. And there were all these light leaks coming through the clouds, which I normally don't like to try to shoot, but I saw them and I thought, what can I do with that? And so I just started doing this really wild kind of movement like that with the camera, and it felt like I was bending light. And that's what I think I even titled one of these images, Bending Light, or something to that effect, because that's what it felt like. It felt like I was bending light. And the difference between when the storm was moving in and it was dark and moody and it was blowing, the wind was blowing and it was starting to rain, and 10 minutes later later when the storm, this fast moving storm was moving out, you know, the lines of the images are fairly similar, but the mood and the feel are different because now it's lighter, and that's just the difference of 10 minutes. And so I always stay and shoot through a scene over a period of time, because you just never know what the light's going to do. It can change, and the conditions can change, and that can always help to create some interesting and different results, even from the same outing. And so this is just an example of how framing can create different effects. So framing the one on the left with the sunset off on the distant horizon over the lake with the light at the bottom and going up, so horizontally, and then up with a push off upwards, and then framing it with the light at the top and going horizontal and kind of falling off there at the end. And so framing, both of these were taken within the same minute, just framing each of the images in a different way to create a different effect. These both are using that shaking motion, so just a tight shaking motion like this. And again, that creates this more impressionistic look and feel. These are both the same exact outing, same exact scene, same location. It's just that the image on the left was part of a waterfall that was more in shadow, but I loved the way the light was just casting this yellow glow right here with the blues, the cool blues that were coming from the shadows, and then in the full sun. So just turning over this way to the right a little bit and getting the waterfall that's in full sun, using the same movement basically, but pointing the camera in different directions within the same scene to create a different look and feel. This is the same field of wildflowers, so essentially I'm pointing the camera in exactly the same location. The image on the left is a looser shaking motion, so a wider, looser shaking motion like this. The image on the right is a very tight shaking motion, so smaller shaking motion and tighter shaking motion. And you can see how that's represented. You see the lines from the looser shaking motion still gives you the recognizability of the flowers, and then that tighter, smaller shaking motion just renders that scene a little bit more impressionistic. You can still tell that it's probably a field of wildflowers, but it's got a different look and feel. So size of movement and speed of movement have an effect on what the end results are going to be. This is a macro shot with using a macro lens, and with a macro lens you don't need to move the camera really very much. And so this is a 1 second shutter speed where I would have kept the camera still for a portion of that 1 second and then a tiny little wave off. And holding it still and then moving helps to imprint the flower, the literal lines of the flower, but then the movement, the small movement afterwards gives you these flowing lines that make it feel like this flower is just floating in air. It's got a really nice ethereal kind of quality to it. These two images are zooming. You saw me doing the zooming in the video, and this is again hand holding and just moving the camera and zooming at the same time. And when you're hand holding and moving the camera and zooming, you get these very wild, wavy lines that are converging into a less pronounced center focal point than if you were on a tripod. So the image at the bottom is a zooming ICM where the camera was on a tripod, and it's, you know, a controlled zoom in a much different way than when you're hand holding. And you can tell that the lines when it's on a tripod and more controlled are very straight lines that come into this very pronounced center focal point, whereas these two images at the top have just a very whimsical feel. The lines are wild, and you can still see the zooming effect in how they come into that center focal point, but not in the same way as if the camera had been on a tripod. This is an example of the same subject, two different kinds of movements, creating completely different effects. So this is a building on the University of Iowa campus. The image on the left is again using that shaking motion like this, and the shaking motion gives you that recognizability of the building. You can tell that it's a building. The image on the right is a very fast sweeping motion, so something like this, like what you saw in the video, and that renders everything a complete blur. And that image then just becomes about the layers of lines and the layers of light and the layers of color, but same exact subject, two completely different movements, creating two completely different effects. So I'll move now into multiple exposure ICMs. I've been doing multiple exposure ICMs since early 2022. And when I say multiple exposure ICMs, what I mean by that is that I am moving the camera for each of the exposures. So I'm not holding the camera and capturing a straight shot and then using ICM for a second shot. I am moving the camera for each of the exposures. And when you combine that moving the camera with all of the exposures with using bright blend mode or dark blend mode, you can really create these very fantastical kinds of worlds. And that's what it felt like when I first created this image back in August of last year, 2022. When I saw that happen on the back of the camera, I just felt like I'm creating a fantasy world. It just felt like I was creating a fantasy world. And so not all cameras have multiple exposure capabilities, and not all cameras have bright and dark blend mode. So if you're a Sony user, you won't have the ability to do multiple exposures in the camera. And then depending on the model and make of camera that you have, some Canons and Nikons both have bright and dark blend mode, and some of them don't have that. But for me, the magic really happens in bright and dark blend mode, especially when you use that with moving the camera for each of the exposures. So this is an example of bright blend mode. And what happens with bright blend mode is that the brightest parts of each exposure are what get the priority. And so what I like to do a lot of times with my bright blend mode, multiple exposure ICMs, depending on the scene and the subject that I'm working with, is I like to take one exposure with the camera right side up. So in this case, it was the London skyline, and I just did a shaking motion like this with the camera right side up. And then the second exposure, I flipped the camera upside down, and you can see that it's kind of a wave, a vertical motion, but you know, it's a little bit more difficult to keep the line straight when you've got the camera upside down and you're holding it like this. So it was a little bit of a wavy vertical motion. And then because bright gets the priority, the brightest parts of each exposure are what come through. And so you essentially get, with this kind of a scene, you get sky on the top and the bottom, and then wherever the overlap is. So, you know, I would have had to overlap some of these darker areas to get some darker aspects to come through. Otherwise, it would have just been all blue, and you wouldn't have seen any of the skyline. But it just feels like it's kind of floating in air. So you can create some really interesting effects using this technique. So dark blend mode is just the opposite of bright blend mode. In dark blend mode, the darker parts of each of the exposures is what gets the priority. And you can see how that plays out with these two exposures, where the top part of the first exposure is much darker than the top part of the second exposure, and the bottom part of the second exposure is much darker than the bottom part of the first exposure. So those darker areas from each exposure are what come through in the final blended image. And again, I'm doing this in the camera. This is not blending in post-process. This is what's happening in the camera. I'm seeing this happen in the moment, in the field, in the camera, and I can be very even more intentional and even more deliberate with my crafting of my images, I feel like, using this technique. And then, you know, there are some areas where the two parts are kind of the tonal values are kind of closer together, and that's where you can get some of these really interesting effects and overlapping and kind of weaving effects. And so dark blend mode gets the priority. For those that don't have bright and dark blend mode, if you have multiple exposure capability, you likely will at least have either something called average, additive, or overlay. And so this is what average blend mode does. Average blend mode is essentially just averaging each of the exposures. Nothing is getting the priority. Everything is coming through. So you can see that represented in the final blended image, that all of the vertical lines of the first exposure and all of the horizontal lines of the second exposure come through in layers of opacities. And so with average and additive blending modes, it's more that they're overlaying, and that's what that the equivalent is really overlay in Photoshop. So if you're blending in post-processing, overlay would do the same thing. And it's just kind of layering each exposure on top, whereas bright and dark blend mode are really blending, and certain things are getting the priority. And so this is additive. It's essentially the same thing. It just works a little bit different. Each exposure's being added to rather than averaged in the same way that additive is, but you do still get to see every aspect of each of those exposures. I don't use additive blend mode at all. I do use average occasionally, and there are certain situations when I do prefer to use average, and I'll talk about that. But I did also want to mention, I didn't mention this yet, I have given Grace a link to a Google Drive folder that has this presentation available for you as a PDF download. So you will be able to download this for future reference if you'd like to have it. So you can kind of study some of these things. And so looking at the average blend mode and then comparing how it differs from bright blend mode, where bright is getting the priority and where dark is getting the priority for dark blend mode. And so this image here on the very bottom row, in the dark blend mode row, that sky was completely blown out, but because I knew I was going to frame the second exposure below the sky, below the tree line, I would be able to fill that blown out sky in with whatever was darker in the second exposure. So you can be very intentional about how you're crafting your images with this technique. And so there are two types that I like to talk about with multiple exposure ICMs. And the first one I call type 1, which is the multiple exposure ICM sequence, which is basically what we just saw, where you saw that I had two exposures blended into one image file. I do mostly work with two exposures. I often will try to work with 3 and 4 exposures occasionally, but I'm really able to create the effects that are pleasing to me generally with 2 exposures. And so on the Canon, this is the menu item that you would be selecting, and it might be called something different on other models of cameras, but for the Canon, it's called this function control priority. And so these next slides are examples of these multiple exposure ICM sequences. I think they're all 2 exposure ME ICMs. And this is again a sunset where I'm at the lake and the sun and the color is reflecting on the water. And I've done one exposure with the camera right side up and one exposure with the camera upside down to create that unique effect. And I can see, after I take the first exposure, I can see the second exposure. I can see the first exposure, a ghost or an overlay of it, so that I can line things up. Not all cameras have that capability either, but it helps me be able to see how to line things up and be very intentional about my how I'm crafting the images. These are a couple of images in Santa Fe. The one on the left is bright blend mode. The one on the left is dark blend mode. And you can see how you are able to just really be very creative and artistic with this technique, using the multiple exposure capabilities and seeing things differently and just reimagining the world around you in unique ways. And this is a dark blend mode image. This was actually in San Miguel, Mexico, San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. I went there to lead an ICM workshop for Santa Fe Workshops in September. And again, it has this very painterly, abstract quality that's very different. No one else is going to have an image like this from San Miguel. This is uniquely me. This is my vision. This is my artistry. These two images are from Santa Fe from in July. The image on the left being bright blend mode, the image on the left being dark blend mode. And again, you know, it's just a really beautiful way to create very artistic and uniquely individual images of a place. You know, you're seeing the essence of the place and you're reimagining the place in a completely new and unique way that is very individual to you and your own artistry. This is bright blend mode, 2 exposures. Another bright blend mode. This is just some signage on the side of a building in downtown Santa Fe, just playing around to create a very unique effect. These two images are from Dublin, and they're both using, in Ireland, these are both using dark blend mode to create a really unique effect. This is actually the Dublin Convention Center. So this is an example of how I would have used I think one of these was actually a horizontal, holding the camera or horizontally and doing a horizontal movement, and then turning the camera vertically and doing a horizontal movement, or vice versa. I can't remember exactly, but you know, you just get a really unique look and feel with this technique that can't be replicated, you know, even by yourself generally, you know, so even sometimes you're not going to be able to replicate the things that you create. So the second type of multiple exposure ICMs I like to talk about is this continuous shooting ICM, which is kind of like rapid fire or high frame rate. And basically when I say that, what that means is I'm putting the camera on this function called continuous shooting, and it's not that I'm not holding the shutter down and letting the camera fire off however many exposures I have it set to. You could do that. You could set the drive mode to allow you to do that, but I like to just press the shutter each time. So for these, I often like to do between like 7 and 9 exposures. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking and moving the camera around a scene. And I'm generally using a little bit faster shutter speed, not a huge difference in the shutter speed, but just enough that it enables the camera to process things more quickly. So basically it's something like this. click, 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 click. And I just move the camera randomly off. A lot of times sometimes I may push out and pull back, or I might zoom while I'm doing that clicking around the scene. So this image here, you can see I've used the zoom while I've clicked, 9 exposures rapidly around that scene. And it just creates these really interesting results where you can feel the energy, you can feel the busyness and the rush of the scene. I love doing this technique in urban environments, especially. And these 2 images are Chicago. This image is from Times Square in New York. And I don't do this technique very often in the natural world. I really like the results I'm able to get in the urban environments, more so than what I do in the natural world. I like to be a little slower with my process in the natural world. So the ME sequences, like the 2 exposures or 3 exposures where I'm very deliberately crafting the image, that works better for me in the natural world. But this is the London skyline, and this is actually using that same technique, but with dark blend mode. And so these images here that we saw previously, they're all using average blend mode. And you can see how you are getting to see all of those 9 exposures. If you were able to really count each of those layers of exposures, you would be able to see that. But in the dark blend mode and bright blend mode, you get a completely different kind of effect. And there is a blending that happens in certain parts of the frame. And so I think this was 4 or 5 exposures, and it just creates a really interesting effect using dark blend mode. This is the Manhattan skyline from the Brooklyn side, and again, using dark blend mode to create a really interesting effect. This is a natural world rapid fire ME ICM, and I did like the results of this. This is also using dark blend mode, and it has a very painterly kind of look and feel. So it is something that I'm experimenting and exploring more with in the last few months. But previously, most of the work that I had done was mostly in this particular style of ME ICM has been in urban environments. So mobile ICMs, that's another way that you can get into doing ICM really easily and really quickly, because you always have your mobile phone with you generally. And so using either an Android or an iPhone and using different kinds of apps that are available. I am an Android user, and so up to this point, I have done most of my mobile ICM work with an Android. I did add an iPhone line to my mobile plan, and I am starting to work with iPhone ICMs just to add another tool and another layer to my artistry. I wanted to have that opportunity to work with the iPhone as well. So we'll have a look at some images from both. So this is the Samsung Galaxy S22 is what I use for the Android, and I use this app called Camera FV5 for the Android. That's not available for iPhones. And so when I use that technique, or when I use this app to do mobile ICMs, I have it set on this synthetic exposure type under the settings, and then I go in and I select either film type or light trail type. And I prefer to use the film type, but you can you can get some really interesting effects with the light trail. And here's an example of that. So this is the film type, and this is the light trail type of using that Camera FV5 app. It's same exact subject, just a completely different look and feel depending on whether you're using the film type or the light trail type. And again, another example of the film type as opposed to or compared to the light trail type. And so you just have to decide really what you prefer. I also prefer to use or have in the past preferred to use the mobile ICMs in urban environments as opposed to natural environments. And so I feel like I can get some really interesting and cool effects with the urban, working in an urban environment with my mobile. This is an architectural feature in Dublin, and I just really liked the way I was able to capture the lines and the juxtapositions of those lines in this particular scene. This is inside the Design Museum in London, and so, you know, because you have your mobile phone with you when you're in a museum or a theater or a restaurant or a gallery or anywhere, it's really easy to do and be creative using your mobile device inside of different venues as well. And so this is Hudson Yard in New York City. I really was happy with what I was able to get with my mobile, with the Android working in this particular scene. Times Square, using the mobile device to create that hustle and bustle and energy and vibe of the city. This is in Dublin, Grafton Street. I loved how I was able to capture this color from this flower cellar on Grafton Street. And so when I'm doing my mobile ICMs, basically I'm just moving the camera something like this. I'm either doing kind of a figure 8, or I might do a circular motion, or I might just, you know, do a combination of those. Sometimes I paddle back and forth, and I do all of that all at one time. So I'm just doing loads of different things and trying different things. And, you know, I can shoot anywhere from 500 to 800 exposures with my DSLR in any given outing. And boy, when you add the mobile device in there and you start shooting with that, you could easily shoot 1,000 frames in any particular outing. And I do often do that. So this is Temple Bar in Dublin as well. And so these are some examples comparing the mobile ICM to DSLR ICMs. You don't get the same smooth lines. That's the thing about the mobile ICMs, is that you're not necessarily always going to be able to get those very smooth lines. And part of the reason for that is that the shutter on your mobile device is not really staying open for, say, a half a second. Like this image here, the DSLR ICM, it would have been about a half a second exposure, and the shutter would stay open for that time on the DSLR. But when you set the shutter speed for a half a second or 1 second on your mobile device, the mobile device camera is actually firing off multiple exposures in that amount of time. So it's not staying open, and you can see how those, you know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines here where you can see I've done this kind of thing with the camera, and that creates that kind of multiple exposure look. It's a little bit more of a digital look and feel compared to the straighter, smoother lines that you get with a DSLR. But, you know, it can have some pleasing effects. Again, here you can see those lines of the multiple exposures that have been fired off. But I do like the effect that I get in the urban environments, especially. So with the iPhone, the slow shutter cam app is one of the apps that you can use. And again, you can use it with light trail or motion blur. I have done both. I've been experimenting with both. And I've been shooting at about 1 second with the slow shutter cam, which is a little bit slower even than what I generally use with my DSLR. And then these are some results from recently, just this past weekend, actually, in the Stanley Museum of Art. And so, you know, I'm able to create some really interesting abstract effects, and it's different even. So these images are even a little bit more different than what I'm getting with my Android and that camera FV5. So I'm really liking the results that I'm getting with the Android or with the iPhone compared to, not that they're better or worse, it's just they're different. So it just adds another layer of artistry and creativity by being able to work with both the iPhone and the Android to do mobile ICM. So these images all are from the Stanley Museum of Art, and because the slow shutter cam actually enables me to do multiple exposure with my iPhone, whereas you can't do that with the Android and the camera FV5. So that's really exciting because I'm able to create very abstract results. The other app that a lot of people with iPhones are using is this Average Cam Pro, and it's essentially firing off multiple exposures. You can set the number of exposures and then the shooting interval. And I have been working with the shooting interval of about of 0 actually, and a number of pictures set to 8. And so this is what that looks like in a natural environment when I was just out on a walk a few days ago. This was actually in the Stanley Museum. This is one of the art exhibits, which is actually a big pink fish, but it's a coffin. So it was interesting to create something different with that using this Average Cam Pro. And then again, another natural world mobile ICM with the Average Cam Pro. So some before and after examples, and I know we're getting close to 1 hour here, so I'll try not to take up too much more time. But I did want to show you some before and after examples to show you what the scene looked like before and then after with the ICM. And so this is a typical winter scene in Iowa, and then using ICM to capture the essence of it. It's not necessarily the most grand landscape for traditional landscape photography, but you can create something really beautiful and magical using ICM. And then if you were to look to the left or to the right of this particular scene, standing on this sandbar next to the Cedar River, what you would see is this, a bluff coming up right against the river. And what drew my attention, what got me to look that way, was the way the sun was reflecting off of the river. So I turned and started working with that. And so these are the lines and the light coming from that light that was reflecting on the river, and then the shadow from the bluff. What drew me to this particular scene to stop and photograph it was the way the light was hitting this ivy growing on the side of this tree, because it felt illuminated and luminous against this back tree that's dark, the bark of this dark tree behind it. And so just working again with that S curve kind of motion like that. This is a waterfall of snow melt, and this is another example. I talked earlier about how you're dragging the light through an image with ICM, and so the waterfall itself is not going in that direction, but because of the way I framed it with that waterfall outside of the frame of the lens and then pulling away like that, it's picking up the light that's reflecting off of that waterfall, and it's dragging it into the frame to create these wispy lines and and it creates a really ethereal effect. And these are those grasses. So we saw this image earlier. That's what those grasses look like. And then in the wintertime, or all throughout the year, actually, if you just look to the right of this particular scene, there's this big pile of mulch or dirt. And in the wintertime, I was out there and I just looked at that pile of dirt and thought, well, what can I do with that? And that's the thing too about ICM, is that if you can just always have this mindset or this curiosity about what if, and saying to yourself or asking yourself, what if I do this? What if I do that? What if I try this? What would happen, if I did that? And so I would never take just a picture of that big pile of dirt just in general, but using it to create what feels like a mountain rising out of the snow, that creates that just helps push your artistry in a beautiful way, because you're seeing the possibilities and you're seeing the potentialities of something that's not really all that attractive, but you're showing a different side of the whole environment, which is the essence of the place more so than the physicalness of it. And so this is just a ribbon of light that's created from this small sliver of light that's come, between the breaking clouds above the horizon, and then that color that's reflecting on the bottom, on the bottom of those clouds. So just using the light to create a ribbon of light. This is icicles on the side of a limestone bluff, and using multiple exposure ICM in dark blend mode creates a really different and unique effect with that. And then the mobile ICM. So this is what the design museum looks like in real life. And then that's my interpretation of it. And then this is another mobile ICM. This is of the Millennium Bridge in London, and then my interpretation of that as well. So before and after examples. So just a few things to keep in mind. I mentioned this at the beginning, that you can break free of the standard photographic conventions. You don't have to worry about a lot of rules. Just be free with yourself and be free to move the camera. You don't need a tripod. I don't use a tripod. I always encourage people to handhold and find ways to create without being encumbered by a tripod. Don't be a perfectionist. There is no right or wrong. It's really about having fun, experimenting, trying new things, looking for things in the scene that appeal to your personal aesthetics, things that you might not even have noticed before. I do find that with ICM, I am seeing things that I don't know if I would have ever picked up on if I'd continued down the traditional landscape path. I feel like I see differently. And so again, the key is really to experiment, playing with a lot of different settings and movements. And the more you do it, the more you're going to understand how those combinations of things, like different types of movements and the different speeds of movements, and how the combination of settings and combined with the movement and speeds of movement are going to create different kinds of effects. And so the more you do it, the more you're going to learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And there's no substitute really for doing the work. You have to do the work. If you only ever approach ICM as kind of an afterthought, I don't feel like you'll ever really be able to grow and evolve it into a form of artistic and creative expression in quite the same way that you would if you gave it dedicated time and attention. And I shoot a lot of images, so don't be afraid to shoot a lot of images. A lot of times people say, I go out and I shot 500 exposures and I only had 1 or 2. I still do that, even after, 7 years, 6 years, however long it's been of doing this. That's still a regular occurrence, even for me. You can be intentional, but there's always going to be a very random and unpredictable element with ICM. And so, that's part of the excitement of ICM, I think. There's always going to be, the technique is always going to find ways to surprise and delight you. Grace mentioned the magazine, the magazine project, so the ICM Photography Magazine. I've been doing this now since 2020. The first issue was in June of 2020. I've been able to work with about 200 photographers around the world, and I pay them for their content in the magazine. And that's something that I'm proud of because I do feel a very strong commitment to support other photographers and artists and to pay them for their content content. And I love, it gives me a lot of joy to share the work of others in this way. I'm not generally, I've had some articles and images in the magazine across the years, but it's not about me. It's about celebrating the work that other people are doing with ICM. And so these are the covers of all of the issues so far. And I am leading on location workshops, both as part of an extension of the magazine. And so if you want to see what some of those on location workshops might be, you can visit this website. I'm also doing online workshops and on location workshops for Santa Fe workshops. I do have 2 new online courses for early 2024 that have just been released, and that there is availability. There are, seats available for registration on those, so you can have a look at the Santa Fe workshops website, and then my own website if you want to see more of my own work. And I don't always publish all of my work on every different platform. So you might see things on Instagram that you don't see on my website, or vice versa, or you might see something on my Facebook page that you don't see on Instagram or on my website. I'm not consistent, I guess, about putting things all out there across everything. And so these are the places you can connect with me. I'm happy to connect, especially if you found some inspiration and you decide to get out and do some ICM. I would love to see the work that you do. It inspires me to see what other people are doing with the technique. So please connect with me if you'd like, and share with me what you do. And so that is my presentation. Are there any questions?
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. That was so much great information. I don't know if you can hear everyone's body, but we all are. And I just want to say too, as Stephanie already mentioned, I will be sending out, she very kindly made this presentation available. I will send out the link to all of you so that you can download and look at it on your own time. And then it will also have all the information about how to connect with her. But do you want to take a few, if anyone has any questions? Lights coming on. Yes, Chris. Do we need a microphone to take over there? If someone could, oh, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Go ahead.
Question, Stephanie. When you're doing sweeping camera movements, do you generally start the movement, open the shutter, close the shutter, and then stop the movement? Is that the technique you generally use?
I'm generally pressing the shutter at the time that I start the movement, and I'm probably going through after the shutter has closed. I'm probably still in movement. It's kind of follow through, I guess is what you might call it. But you can start the movement before you press the shutter. That can be helpful depending on what your subject is and what you're trying to achieve. So you can often, start the movement first to get on a trajectory, a straight trajectory, say if you want to get a straight line or something, and then press as you're going. But I'm generally pressing at the same time that I do start the movement.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions at all? Or I see a hand. Is that Emily? Okay. Microphone is coming your way. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. I was wondering for the continuous shooting photos that you were talking about, and they were like an urban setting. I'm not sure if you said what type of camera motion you were doing. Was that a shake or like what do you normally, I mean, I guess the images that you showed.
Yeah, so for that continuous shooting, I'm just doing this kind of movement. I'm moving the camera around the scene as I'm pressing the shutter. So if I have it set to do 9 exposures, those 9 exposures will blend into one image file. And I'm basically doing something like click, 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 click. So I'm moving the camera and I'm clicking the shutter, and then it will compile all of those 9 exposures. So I might do click, 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 click. I might do click, 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 click. I'm just doing very random movements. So I am moving the camera around the scene, but I'm also using generally a little faster shutter speed than I do with my other kinds of ICMs. So you might not necessarily get the same kind of movement in each of those individual exposures, but the combination of them being combined into one file creates that impression of movement, if that makes sense.
That does. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Anybody else? And also online, I don't know if anyone is online. Is anyone in the chat? If anyone in the chat as well, if you want to, I can't see it, so.
There's no questions in the chat.
Okay, thanks for checking on that. All right, going once. Anyone else? I think that is it. Well, Stephanie, we really appreciated your presentation. I know I, for one, feel very inspired to go out and try some new things. There was a lot there that I haven't tried and look forward to doing. So thank you so much, and we look forward to staying connected. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my passion. And I do hope to connect with you all and see what you do with ICM. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we will take a few minutes for our intermission, and we'll probably make it a little shorter so that we can get into the critique time and get through that in a timely manner. All right, thanks.
Are we got any ACs? Lori said it's
Several people like it.
Let's slide over.
Yeah, David, go ahead and talk.
Oh, 1, 2, 3. No, I don't think this is a slide.
Yeah, turn, it was. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on now.
1, 2, 3.
Hold on.
No.
That's one.
2, 3.
Now it's off. There we go. Yeah, turned it off.
Hey, get them going with sharing moments. I'd like to acknowledge Bill Summers, who brings the refreshments for every meeting. Bill, well, good to see you. Yeah, he's got to, get the coffee done, you got to do the cleanup, pick up the cookies and stuff, so it's really a great job because. Rick Eshel is feeling under the weather, so he's not going to be presenting the sharing moment tonight, but that doesn't mean we are not going to do it. So tonight, our 2 participants are John Stieber and David Long. So, John, are we ready?
I have a problem. For some reason, the app I want to share is not available.
Uh-oh. Slight technical glitch here.
Another one, such as we're nice.
John, why don't you do some dancing?
So while he's pulling it up, so this was what you're going to see is a sunset shot, and the particular sunset shot is, George and myself and Brian and Rick were on a backpacking trip
No,
last
see,
summer.
when I share
This
that
is summer.
thing,
That's my
And,
desktop.
on this backpacking trip, we were,
see,
I was
can
late
share the
because I had to do
desktop.
some work
Yeah.
and,
But I
showed up
cannot
a day
share
late to catch up with these guys. And of this
This
backpacking trip,
application.
I
That's
got
one I
there
want
and
to
it was
share.
just about nightfall
Oh,
and, happened to be, looking like it was gonna start raining. And it was, the clouds were really building
So let's
in
try
no
that.
time flat. And,
Okay, that doesn't help.
on the word, so the picture shows, when you say sunset. So when the sun set. This happened. But the best part was while George is working hard to get this to happen, George was so kind that he brought about at least 2 6-packs of beer in his backpack. And we hiked in, it was a good like 3 hours at least. And he would offer up a beer at night. And I was like, I'm not gonna drink your beer. You lugged that in for 3 hours at least, you know, I can't drink your beer. And he was like, no, go ahead. I'm like, sure, okay. Night 2, he did it again. I got some beer. I was like, you still have it? So anyways, we had some beers for a couple of nights. And so Brian and I were lucky to have some beers of George's. And there you have it. So thanks for looking at my shot.
wait a minute.
There
Wait a
we
minute.
go. All right. So drum roll it is.
Ah, come on. Ah,
There we go. All right.
okay.
So there's the shot on the left. There we go. There's the shot of Chicken Foot Lake. I have to remember to say Chicken Foot because I usually say something else. Well, the best part was while I'm on this shot taking this picture, George is about 50 feet to my right getting a shot. And Brian is above getting a shot of us getting the shot, which won a photojournalism shot in 1 month. So that you can all kind of remember the scene where there's been shown in the camera club many times. But, you know, gorgeous light. I mean, believe it or not, there was moving the sliders a little bit on the color and that was it. It was just, it was absolutely brilliant. But the reason I like this one so much is that little drop of rain that's in the middle of the pond, the middle of the lake. You can just barely see it. So just one drop and then all of a sudden it's already come. Yes, Rachel?
How did you get the beautiful rocks are sharp up close? And in this, how did you get the whole?
I got as far up as I could, the tripod at the highest point, and I was up on a rock a few, maybe just 4 or 5 feet above. So my depth of field was about 10 feet away. So I was just hoping that was it.
Okay.
And it worked. And I focused in the middle of the lake. Yeah, that's what my focus was, on the raindrop spot. Thank you so much.
What do I have in my other supporting shots?
Yeah.
Next up is David.
You probably ought to turn this one down.
Come on.
No, go up there.
I'm not sure what's going on.
All right. For technical. All right.
Eh,
So I have several slides before my shot. And this was when we were in Tanzania in August. And you'll see in front, we were at the Mara River. And we went there for the river crossing to occur. We waited 7 hours for the river crossing. Now you see, over here, you can't see there's probably 30, 40 safari vehicles on this side of the river. And on the other side of the river are supposed to be the wildebeest and the zebras coming across the river, right? They're not here. We were there. And then later on in the day, they appeared. Now, what you can't see is there are
thousands more behind them, you know, and they're just gathering here. And we were waiting and waiting, and finally he said to our guide Emmanuel in our safari vehicle, I said, the light is getting low. I mean, you can't tell because I brightened up the shot. The light is getting low. Should we, what do you think? He said, 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, you know, because some of the vehicles in our group had already left. And then in 5 minutes, this is what happened. This one wildebeest started to cross the river. And they're shy about going across because of crocodiles. You know, so which one is going to be brave enough to come across the river? So this guy comes, and then and you'll see in the next shots, they all started to pour. And it doesn't look like very many here, but this went on for about, I think about an hour. They're just pouring across the river. And then our guide Emmanuel goes, look, there's a leopard. And I go, where? This guy was off to the side there, and he's looking at these wildebeest, and I thought he was going to try to get one of them. And then once in a while, he would take his left paw, and he'd kind of go, stop. and he was, you know, he gets his prey by leaping on them. And of course, he's in the wrong direction. And then somebody told me, he said, well, it's not going to go after them. Look how fat he is. He's full. He's not hungry at all. So this was amazing. This is the story behind the leopard in the wilderness.
Well, thank you, David and John. That was great. So next up, we're going to show the winners from last month, and then we'll be going into the critique. So yeah, we'll see how these technical things work.
Okay.
Okay, so the assigned subject was home, and the winner was heading home, or headed home by Anne Leslie.
All right.
For abstracts, Under the Eaves by Rachel Rosenthal. For architecture, Transit Parker Building by Robert Arnold. For fauna, White Horses of the Kamar. Did I say that right, George?
Yes.
Hey. Laura. And in the summer, the leaves. And that is by Ingrid Lockhart.
No, natural landscape.
Oh, sorry. Natural landscape. Trey Chine by John Seaver. For night photography, Tunnels, also by Rachel Rosenthal.
That's nice.
For people, Loki, and that was one of mine. That she was wearing that mask, smoking that cigarette. And for photojournalism, Missing the Boat, again by for travel, Saint Michel from Meanders. I might have mispronounced that. How do you say it, George?
This is in English.
All right. For creative fantasy, anything goes is White Horses of France Reimagined by Bernadette Sylvester. Manipulated but realistic, Aqua Dragon by Dave Arstein. Black and White Other is Shadow Leaf by Robert Arnold. Color, Glory by Kathy Trujillo. And for phone, another Bodie shot, Bodie Church Sunset by Bob Free. So how about a round of applause for the last 19 minutes?
Thank you. So we're going to move ahead into critique, and I want to thank in advance our critiquers for tonight, Douglas Hooper and David Wong. So we will get started with our assigned subject, which was broken. And first up is broken windshield.
Tonight's, hello, Craig.
Hold on, there you go.
Am I here? I'm here.
Yeah.
Tonight's photos start off with a bang. This is a really nicely done photo. I looked at it for a while. There's light behind and light in front. I love the lighting in this picture. I love the composition, the off center. It's dramatic and negative, but still strangely beautiful. It also, the way the glass cracked, it looks like ice in places as well. So it's a picture with many dimensions, and it's really well done.
And artist is Shelby Cohen. Next, we have Broken In.
So, before I start, just to mention that for Douglas and I, these are all our personal opinions. So please, take them as such and know that there are many different ways to look at all of these images. But ours is not it's not the gospel and the ultimate truth. So take that as is, and with that, this one I thought conveyed the category very well. Obviously, I like the exposure and the focus and the depth of field in this, and obviously conveys a feeling of old run down. Maybe minor points for a stronger image. The bright window, it steals a little bit of the attention from the couch itself, because obviously the brightest part is what you also often pays attention to. You might crop out some of the edge distortions or eye leaks, like along the right edge with those little shells. If you did that, I think it would be great, very strong. Thank you.
The artist is Kathy Triolo. Next is Oxidation.
So oxidizing isn't really breaking. The windshield wipers are in bad shape. It's got a toe strap still strapped around it. You see the reflection of the car from the back window of this truck cab. But yeah, this is broken. It's not a very fast car at this point. It's pretty nicely done picture. I would crop a little off the right to center it. I think this picture, this subject wants to be centered in the frame. That's it.
Okay. And the artist is Emily Weissman. Next, we have Fall.
I thought this was a very creative use of fall colors on these glass shards, with edges of glass pulling the viewer's eye in multiple directions. I think the soft focus on the colors, and then the sharp, give you a sharp distinction between the glass and the background. I thought it was very nicely done.
The artist is Tom Quinn. Next up is Rough Morning.
Yeah, my reaction to this picture just says it all. His head's down. This is not good. He probably has to tell his older brother that he broke his boy. Yeah, photographically, it's well done, well framed, good exposure, a nice photo, nice communication here.
The artist is Anne Westling. Moving into our abstract category, we're starting with trailer reflection.
I thought this was a very nice use of reflection. I like how there's sharper, distinct edges and stronger contrast pulls your eye towards the center, while the softer focus trails keeps the trails with your focus. It keeps it within the frame, but it kind of falls off to the edges. There's a nice monochromatic nature of the photo, adds to the abstract nature with the stretching of the middle of the image, pulling the viewer's eyes, you know, up and down. And I thought it did a nice job of that.
And the artist is Jerry Thomas. Next, we have a shadow play at the nursery.
Nicely done. This, when it first came up on my screen, made me look once, twice, 3 times. This is a very intriguing image. And then the background looks like outer space. So that really gives another dimension to this. A nice black and white treatment. I like the composition, framing, the balance of this photo. Nicely done.
The artist is Bill Osowski. Next is Plume Agate Micrograph.
I think this one had a wonderful sense of shape and colors. The strong, on my monitor, that orange was very much red. That strong color draws your viewer's eye kind of away from the top and bottom and to the horizontal center, as does the little white reflections here and there. I found it kept my eyes searching for details and meaning in the various shapes and colors. Very well done.
The artist is Daniel Chaplin. And last one in the category, Twisted Porcelain.
This one's interesting. It seems to be a reflection, I think. I'm assuming that plates are actually straight and something's distorting them. And there's no, it's not full tonal range, which could be part of the artist's statement. And they chose to frame right to touching the plates on 3 sides, and then the top they had to choose between touching one and let the other one go. And that's all interesting choices for an abstract. I thought this was a really good attempt to experiment. The background kind of helps it along, though, gives it some color.
The artist is Gary Kartstaff. Excuse me. Next up, architecture, Portal in Madrid.
I really like the point of view in this image and a strong contrast in the circular lines. I think black and white was a really good choice of this, and it focuses on more on the luminosity and the shapes, and they emphasize the form. The people in the portal itself kind of added to pulling, I think, the viewer's eyes. They're very hard to see, but it added to pulling the viewer's eyes into the photo. Nicely done.
And the artist is Monica Hughes. The next is Harpa Concert Hall, Iceland.
It's a nice treatment, nice photo for the architecture category. The photographer was aware of the rule of thirds and used them well, not exactly on the thirds lines, but the thinking was used to produce a very nice composition of an interesting subject, and shadows were included as part of the composition. And it came together nicely. It has a kind of a light green cast to it. It could be from the glass, which makes it doesn't bother me. It just makes it a little more interesting, a little different. Nice.
Artist is Jerry Thomas. Next we have the Cloisters.
I love the lighting and the shapes of this scene from Glasgow, Scotland. The repetition of the arches form a very nice flow for me. And then having everything in the center in this photo works well. This is there's a sense of comfort, I think, for me, in that the perspective pulls the eye towards the door in the lower third. One of the places that I would definitely recommend you see if you go to Glasgow is this place in the University of Glasgow. Beautiful shot.
The artist is Bill Wages. Next, we have the Eye of the Storm.
I like this one. I think the composition was thought through really well. I like the balance of the black and white and the straights and the curves. I don't have any negative criticisms. I just had fun exploring this picture for a while. I like the title too, by the way. I think this was very nicely done.
Artist Elodie Prusa. And finally, Old Barn with Fence and Weeds.
This was a great contrast to the formality of the concrete steel structures that we've seen. I like the diagonal lines, and you'll hear this often from me. I like diagonal lines. There's strong elements in the photograph, like along the fence from the lower right up to the left there. And then as it goes up to the left, then the roof diagonals work to move your eye from towards the middle there, up to the roof, to the center of the peak. I think the photographer's perspective was very good. The surrounding trees kind of form an arch and framing the roof as well. Exposure, depth of field were very, very well handled. I think my only ding, I don't know if you can see it, there is a letter P in the bottom right-hand corner. And I think you could remove that.
The artist is Patricia Levitin. And next we have our fauna category. Starting with Finch with an attitude.
This came together so well. What a great photo. The bird on its own has plenty of personality for the picture. And then this wire handle veil it's holding onto gives it yet another dimension. When it first came on my screen, I thought, what is that? Like a miniature garden hose? No, it's a fishing pole. Then it's a handle. Very successful photo. It's very sharp and the background's very soft. This is all very satisfying to the viewer. There are 5 dust spots up and down the left side. I would get rid of those. So what a great bird capture.
The artist is Ingrid Lockhart. Next is Jamila of the Serengeti.
So Jamila, very nicely titled, means beautiful in Swahili. It's a great title for this lioness. I think it's a very nice headshot with the soft background, an excellent focus on the lion's head. The depth of field on this was spot on. I really like the gaze of the lion's eye off to its right. I think actually this one doesn't look as dark as in my image, but I thought maybe just a little brightness around the eyes might have made it a little stronger. I love the mood of this and how you can almost sense the lion's thinking.
Artist is Lori Woodhall. Next, Thompson, Gazelle, and Shadow.
When I first saw this one, I thought, well, it's a beautiful, sharp picture of a gazelle, but it seems a little out of balance in the frame. That was about a 1-second thought. And then I saw the gazelle in the background. I thought, wow, I like this. The way they fit together like puzzle pieces. That works really well for me. I also like the shadow of the right horn on its right ear. That's pretty cool too. For my take, I would actually bring down the top order about 5 or 10%, kind of crowding the head of the gazelle in the background. But for me, that makes all the puzzle pieces fit together better.
The artist is David Wong. Next, we have Custer State Park Bison.
So I really enjoy the composition of these 3 bisons in the frame. The photographer did a good job of opening up the shadows, around the face and the eyes to show more of to show the eyes of the bison. I especially like the stare of the young one on the right. The lighting in this one, I don't think, couldn't have been more challenging with the bright contrast and dark areas of the bison's faces. It looked like the photographer had pulled up the exposure to get those faces to show. And when they did that, I'm guessing that so by bringing out the bright areas of the grass, now overexposed. And I would suggest rather than looking at the entire exposure, select the subjects in Photoshop and then increase just the subject area exposure in the shadow using a brush light. Finally, if you have something like topaz noise, you can reduce the color noise in the shot that was introduced when you had to pull up the exposure so much to see the eyes. I like the swishy tail.
The artist Gary Newell. Next is Upside Down B.
So the bee is very sharp, which you were able to see it close. The head, the body, very sharp. The legs, front and back are a little out of focus, but that's okay. The composition choice, I think everybody knows, is unusual. With the bee's head crowded so close to the right border. We're in the fauna category, and the title says we're looking at the bee. So I would crop. I think the flowers are pretty, but they just really aren't what this picture's about. I would bring the left border way over, just behind the bee's abdomen, and even bring the bottom border up just close to the wings. The top border would still come down and should show the branch somewhat. Would come down also pretty close to the bee's legs, and then I think you have a much stronger shot. There seems to be enough focus in the bee existing already that it can hold that crop.
Artist is Jeff, excuse me, Jeff Alstatter. Next, we have African Bud.
So this is on this model with this projector. It looks very bright on my screen. It looked perfectly exposed. So we'll just take that into consideration. I think this is a plain back pipit, from what I could tell. I like the exposure and the sharp focus. At least at my screen, it was very good, especially with the harsh light of the bright sun. My only thought is to crop in on the bird more, because there's this part that doesn't contribute to it, and this part that doesn't contribute to it. And by cropping in on here, just with the bird and these two leaves and these leaves, you have everything in the story right here. And I just thought that would make it even more powerful. And it also, the other thing is the background is very plain. It's a cloudless sky. And by cropping in just on the bird and the adjacent leaves, you pay less attention to the fact that it's a cloudless sky.
Artist is David Nelson. Next is Crocodile Fish, Indonesia.
Boy, some of the photos. Amazing. This was very well done, and again, like so many on my monitor, was very nicely exposed. I would crop in slightly from the right border and a little bit more from the top. Other than that, I have no constructive criticism. I think you have a very successful picture. The poor guy has sand in his eyes, it looks like.
Artist is Mark Davis. Next, when you have to use your mom voice.
This is a really great picture. Perfect depth of field and focus with the lion's expression. I think this photo shows a really good example of having the settings correct and being ready for that shot. You know, just at that moment, the soft foreground and background add nice depth to the shot. The shutter speed is fast enough to capture to get a nice sharp focus on it. I only wonder if, you know, the ISO, there's a bit of noise in this. The ISO was too high, maybe the shutter speed was too high if you were an auto ISO. But noise can be tamed very well these days. And if you use a program like Topaz Denoise, it would have made a very nice photo even better. Very well done.
The artist is Janice Rosner. And last category, pose.
Another spectacular animal shot. The backlighting is beautiful, the front lighting is beautiful. The moment is amazing. The depth of focus is perfect. And like David said, this photographer was ready for this action. You got the picture. I like the cropping for the most part. I do wish the photographer had gotten the feet in the picture. I think with the feet, you have a world-class picture. And I've been in situations like this, the action goes up and I move my camera up and then I go, oops, missed the beat. So really spectacular shot.
The artist is Emily Weissman. We only have two in our flora category. First one is hair.
This is a really interesting, fascinating shot. It just invites me to explore it. The lines of the grass are graphically interesting and gives it a sense of being alive. I can feel the movement of this grass. And I like the very slight, gentle vignetting of it, whether it's on purpose or not. It's interesting shot.
The artist is Sheila Ryan. And then we have the heart of a dahlia.
Everybody around me saying, ooh, pretty, and it is. So very nicely done. A nice flower was chosen, the lighting is great, the composition choice, how close or how far to be from the flower was perfectly chosen. The depth of field was great. I couldn't find anything in this image that was out of focus. So good. It came out perfect there.
And the artist is Ingrid Lockhart. Now we're into the natural landscape, starting with sunset.
So this is not your typical sunset. I enjoyed the silhouettes of all the boats in the shot. And the contrast, and as more I look at this, there was the contrast of the large passenger ship, on the horizon. And then you have a small boat with somebody in the foreground. The variety of boats and the placement of the photo gives a nice sense of balance there. There's one boat in the lower foreground, there's a bunch across the horizon, and they're just kind of nicely spread out. And then the dark clouds kind of balance with the glow of the sunset in the middle, as does the dark right-hand corner. So there's a very nice sense of balance in all of this. And then finally, I noticed the person on the dock with the dog. Well done, subtle and very interesting.
The artist is Natalia Caputo. Next, reaching.
So when we look at these pictures, the critics see them on the screen first, and then learn the title at some point. And when I first saw this, I thought, well, is this a picture of the sky or the sun or the trees? And then I got the title, so it's the trees. I think if you want to say something about the trees need to be a bigger part of the picture. The sky does make an interesting background for them. And you did some work, I see, getting the exposure to the sun in control. So that would be my advice, is it is about the trees, make it about the trees, bring them more into the picture.
The artist is Sheila Ryan. Next is Morning in Red Rock Country.
I think this photo had just an amazing depth to it, with the rocks in the plateau to the echoes of the towering rock formations in the distance. The dark clouds with the rain add a nice touch of atmosphere. I monitored, they were a little darker, and being a little darker, they really even added more atmosphere. It was a nice counterbalance to the bright sun on the foreground with those rain clouds. Beautiful landscape. I found myself wondering if I would crop off the 10% of the right side would have made it work a little better for me. That's just me. That part is a little bit empty, and what I'm talking about is just kind of this part here, and there's an emptiness here, and if I just crop there, it puts more on the focus on the visual line of the foreground to the distant rocks, and there's a little bit of an upward diagonal you see from here to here, and by cropping that, it just kind of emphasizes that a little bit of the thought. I love the subtle colors and the horizontal bands of light. Very well done.
And the artist is Brian Dunbar. Next is Eastern Sierra Long Lake.
So this photo strikes me as a very satisfying photo to look at. I travel naturally in the mobile around the middle of the picture. The bushes help frame it. Where I'm going to get to the end of the story is I have no constructive criticism for this. I think the photographer did this just perfectly. The vignette, it's a relatively heavy vignetting for a natural scene. It works for me. I don't know if others might say, hey, that picture's vignetted. It's always good with a natural scene to make it as subtle as possible. Just a random comment. I think I like the way you did it. So to me, it's a great picture.
The artist is Henry Goodman. Next is There's a Waterfall on My Land.
I like the views of all of these waterfalls in one shot, especially if this was on the property of the photographer. And that'd be even more amazing. I'd love to visit it. The exposure on my monitor was good. It's a little bright here, but the exposure was good. And there's a good example of some nice slow shutter speed to get the smoothness to the waterfalls without making them just a cloud of white by being too long. My suggestion is, though, I think I would shoot the individual waterfalls by themselves, because there's easily 3 separate waterfall shots here. It would be done by themselves. Having everything in one shot, it's hard for my eye to land in any one spot, and there's this big green leaf section in the middle that kind of takes my eye away from the rest of it. I think it would be nice if we could split this up.
The artist is Shelby Cohen. Next is Sun Rises Over Mono Lake Tufas.
This is very nicely done. As photographers, we realized that that's the sun coming up. So this photographer is looking into the sun and these are backlit, and yet they look really pleasantly lit. So that was handled very nicely. The subject was chosen well, and it's a nice coherent grouping of the tufa to make a really pleasant composition. The depth of focus is great. I don't think anything out of focus in this picture. So everything was handled really well. It's a pretty picture.
The artist is George Falcone. Next is Electric Sky in Utah.
So this is a wonderful image, and I just pictured a little bit darker, and the exposure was just great. The light in the foreground to the dark sky, and that fantastic lightning shot. It's a great technique in capturing. I'm assuming that the photographer just left the shutter open long enough to catch it and not overexpose the scene while still capturing the lightning. I like the bands of light from the foreground plateau to the thunderclouds and the bright light on the clouds in the upper right, and they were captured without being blown out or close to it at least. There's a diagonal line from the gully north upwards to from this area to here. I love that diagonal line. There's another diagonal line from here up to here. And I think it's the only minor flaw for me is that this horizon here, I'd like to see this horizon line leveled, because you look at it, it looks a little tilted, and I think if you leveled it, it would make it a little more pleasing for me. When I leveled the images and I kept the framings the same perspective, it improved the cropping, because it then took out this dark rock here and it ended here. So I think you still had this going up to the very corner, which is wonderful. This got
moved over a little bit to the right, but, you know, those are just some suggestions. I thought this shot was just amazing.
The artist is Eric Engels. Next is When You Gotta Go.
So this is an interesting photo to see in the natural landscape category.
There's nothing more than that.
At first, I thought that can't be real, can it? And I know, yeah, there's somebody whispered behind me, it looks photoshopped, and those thoughts cross your mind when you see this picture. I zoomed in on it, it looks like there's really a foundation built into the rocks there. It could very well be a real picture. The photographers decided to use some heavy vignetting in the sky, and even the outhouses vignetted. There's darker more at the top than the bottom, which makes it look a little more surreal. And then there's a color shift as well. And these are all things that make you go, ooh, is this real or not? So I don't know what to make of this picture. It does make a very visually stunning picture. I'll put it at that.
And the artist is Monica Hughes. And last one in this category is After the Storm.
I enjoyed this photo, especially with this square image, an aspect ratio that I think is often ignored. I like the light being brighter in the waves at the top, helping to move your eye from the darker rocks in the water into the more into the bright, more distant waves on the horizon. There's a nice depth of image control and control of depth of field. I felt that the fogginess of the image and the rocks obscured the use. What I did was I went into Photoshop and I played with the contrast and the clarity, which punched up the contrast quite a bit, and it made the image more dramatic, with more distinct outlining of the light on the rocks in the foreground and the middle mountain area, while giving the swirls of white in the water more punch. But this is different from the dreamier way the photo was shown. So, you know, that's just me. If you like the more dreamy effect, leave it alone.
The artist is Dave McClellan. All right, we're into night photography. And first we have St. Andrews, Amalfi Coast.
Gorgeous image. It's worked so well, and there's apparently a lot of lighting on the outsides of the buildings, and back is a mountain that just goes straight up out of the picture, which I think is so cool. It's misty back behind, which is surprising. So the only real blacks in the picture are the boats and that wall on the left border, essentially. I think this is darn close to a perfect night picture. My small recommendation is to vignette or darken the right border down a little bit. But I would leave the top the way it is. I like knowing that there's a giant mountain that goes up the top of the picture. So nice job. This is beautiful.
The artist is John Siebert. Next is Santa Barbara Dolphin Fireworks.
I think this was a really nice capture of with the highlights on the dolphins and with the fireworks behind them. I think a successful photo of the action, the beauty of the fireworks against the dolphins. Normally, I like having the inclusion of people in my shots, but for some reason, for me in this shot, just a little bit of a distraction. And I think the best part, at least for me, was the photo where the two major dolphins and the fireworks behind them. And I thought if the lower portion of the photo was cropped, then you wouldn't have the people, and it would eliminate the the brightness of the tail here, taking away from the rest of it. So just a kind of a crop along that line here. Anyway,
my thoughts.
The artist is Gary Stephanie. Next is Milky Way core above Convict Lake.
Nice job. Takes a lot of work to make a picture like this come together. The Milky Way was exposed well, the mountains, probably under moonlight, I'm guessing, and the lake were exposed well, and everything was matched up, and the composition was good. It all came together pretty well, and just looking at this picture for a while, I thought, well, what if this is mine? What would I explore? And I would actually try, I held my hand up and cropped off maybe the top 20, maybe even 25%. Use a little of the Milky Way, but I think it makes it a more powerful image overall.
The artist is George Popel. Next is Moody Blues.
So this is an interesting capture of a night scene. I like the juxtaposition of the trapezoid shape from this one here to this one here. And then I like the leading lines, how it pulled you into the center from here to here. The only wish that the light in the center wasn't blown out. But then after I looked at that, I go, wait a minute, there's two more trapezoids here and here. And so this has got like 4 trapezoids in it. And I thought instead of calling it Moody Blues, I might have named this one Trapezoid Nights myself.
The artist is Eleni Priscilla. Next is Night in Wild Nevada.
I like the surreal quality this photo has. I like the dark-ish clouds partially blocking the Milky Way. It's a very three-dimensional looking picture to me. I like that. I think the cropping was well done. The lighting on the trees is just glowing from the sky somehow. It really looks cool that way. I have no constructive criticisms for this. I think this was nicely done.
The artist is Eric Ingalls. And then we have Andromeda Galaxy.
So this is a beautiful shot of Andromeda. I'm always impressed by good astrophotography. It's much harder than it looks. You know, I'm not very good at it. But I think my only thoughts, very minor, was getting even more drama from it. And what I did is I brought the contrast, clarity, and shadow sliders up a little bit, and all of a sudden the dark and bright details of the galaxy popped even more. And in addition, when I did that, the thousands of more stars popped into view. Just a thought.
And the artist is Daniel Chapman. All right, on to people. First one is Bill gets air and becomes SI.
Here we see the world famous dance teacher, Bill Wages, teaching the locals how to do it, how to do the hip hop stick dance. This is a really fun photo. Nothing really to change about it. It's a great moment in time. It really engages the viewers on emotions.
The artist is David Wong. Next is the mustache.
I like this photo because it has a really good sense of story. I wish it was sized properly so you could see more of it. But anyway, sometimes a photo gets you to think, I wonder what's going on. And I think this photo does that with the man's eyes gazing to his right at something out of the scene. His hands show a gesture of an explanation, like he's talking to somebody, add to this question of story. I think the brim of the Western hat darkened his eyes, leave just enough for you to see his gaze and even have more wondering. All this reminds me of my favorite artist, Edward Hopper, who his fingers were always looking at something out of the scene. and you were wondering what it was. I think my only wish is that he was a little bit to the right of the frame, giving him more room to look at whatever it was he's looking at. But that might not have been possible given whatever was there. Nicely done.
And the artist is Bill Osowski. Next is Masai.
This is later in the class. This is a fun photo because at first glance, it looks like, hey, there's a really tall person. And then you look down and, oh, they're not attached to the ground. Cloudy lighting helps all the shadows show well, the colors in the fabric. It's a nice photo. I wouldn't change anything. I think it was nicely done, and with the lead in person, it's an intriguing photo to look at.
And the artist is David Nelson. Next, we have Waiting for Bart.
I think another interesting photo story of people in different points of concentration. From the foreground with the woman looking down at something here, to the man on the cell phone, the person behind with the hidden face, the person with the scooter. I think all of this, while you're opposing on the left side of the image, the BART train, the lines of the BART train, the tracks, the vertical fencing on the other side of the photo, all opposite of the people. And I think my only suggestion is maybe to use in Photoshop to select the subjects and kind of bring up the exposure on the people a little bit, and give them a little more detail so you can get a better sense of them, what they look like. And then finally, I brought this into a 16:9 aspect ratio on my monitor, something I rarely use, but this eliminated the emptiness below the woman's feet in front, that foreground, and it cut off the half sign at the top. And I just thought it, force dry a little bit more into the action.
The artist is Jeff Alstetter. Next is Mads Tolling.
It's a great action picture, the musician in action. The subject is isolated very nicely, so we can just look at him. The focus is perfect. Changing the black and white works well for this picture. The performer seems very energized. Picture came out just right. Good job.
The artist is Mike Shea. Next, Walking on Sunshine.
So we'll try to pick up the pace a little bit here. I know it's 8:50 and we don't have a whole bunch more, but we'll try to pick it up. I like it. It doesn't look like he's walking on water. And I like, this square format again. I think a little crop would on the left and right would take out the emptiness, and then it would give you more focus on that diagonal I always think about, but from here to there. And I think just maybe pulling up the clarity a little bit would just brighten up some of the people against the water and darken some of the waves. But nice shot.
And the artist is Natalia Komodoto. And last one in the category is Baby Practice.
This is a good moment captured. The subjects were all in shade and background the sun. The photographer handled that really well. Found an interesting subject, and then the young woman to the left looking at the camera engages us more, and she's got a pleasant expression. So that's nice. Makes an interesting photo.
But none of these women were pregnant.
No, this is like a high school class, baby practice.
And the artist is Kathy Triolo. All right, moving right along, photojournalism. We only have two in this category. So the first one is 1,500 feet up, 1,500 feet, or 1,500 to go.
This is a wonderful shot with the shape of the rock faces and the light and the shadow and the textures all, juxtapositioning with the tiny climbers. The vertical lines of the right shadow help give you a really vertical sense of the shot. I enjoyed the balance of the lower, the balance of the shadow in the lower corner here with this one here, the tall shadow on the right, oh, the balance against the tall shadow on the right. I'm assuming this was a drone shot, very nicely done.
The artist is Tom Quinn. And Sea Lions stage sit-in, protest unfair gate policy.
Good one, good title, good photo, good for photojournalism playing around. I think this is successful. It's a very nice, technically very nice photo. My one suggestion is I don't think the two seals on the left really support the statement, and because of the curve of the big seal, you can crop right up next to that big seal and get a more concise statement. Everything else is great with this picture.
The artist is Anne Westling. All right, travel. First one is Longyearbyen. I don't know if I said that right. Longyearbyen row houses.
I think it was a really nice juxtaposition of the shapes and colors of the man-made houses against the natural elements of the snow-covered mountains. The only thing I did was I added a little bit of the haze to it, and it brought out this blue, came out really nicely blue, which kind of helped balance against this. My own comment was, there is this white banding here. Something left from a Photoshop artifact that would be eliminated. Otherwise, nice looking.
The artist is Janice Wassner. Next is Reflecting on Chincoteague.
Nice travel photo, and it kind of naturally vignettes itself. It's got the feeling of being somewhere else. The stone wall, the baskets, the glass bottles. And I also like that I see, yeah, exactly. I get good whispers behind me here. Buildings from somewhere else reflecting in the glass bottles. That's cool.
And the artist is Brian Dunbar. Next is Taiwan National Museum entrance.
I think this was a photo with really nice contrast, shapes, colors, lines, and objects. I mean, they're all in here. I like the lines going up in the center, bringing you up from the bottom. The only thing this is very, very minor, but there's a little tilt in here. That might just, straighten it up a little bit. It's pretty minor. Nice photo.
And the artist is Ed Sylvester. And we have Sicily, Italy by Glock. Check.
This is a fun photo. And again, this photographer had shadow halfway up and sun the rest of the way and did a good job balancing it out. A little bit of dodging on the head tube of the bike would have completed that process completely. The cactus in the basket is pretty humorous. It'd be funny to ride that bike with that there. And I love the blue and the gold, the color palette. This is a really nice picture. Good cropping, good photo.
Artist is John Siebert. Just a couple more. Is first those of Arusha Butcher.
I thought this was another nice square photo of a butcher in Tanzania. The only thing that I thought would be helpful, but in this brighter image, I don't know if it really needs it. I just wanted to see a little bit more of the darker side of his face, so I brought up the shadow slider and the contrast a little, which popped the colors and brought out the colors more of the meat inside as well. And pardon me, I thought this was a nice slice of life.
Artist is Lori Woodhall. And last one in the category is All Aboard.
This looks to me like a postcard from 1963. It's very nicely put together as far as the elements go. It composes very well. Other than the bright light in the upper left-hand corner, it's a little bit eyeful. Everything else about this was put together very nicely. Good photo.
The artist is Gary Emanuel. I just have a few in creative fantasy. First up is Me as a Tree.
I thought this was a really creative way to look at oneself as a reflection or shadow in the tree. I like this alternative look. The only minor things is, I wanted a little more room at the top, and this would just, because I just wish that, maybe you could just build a little more room up there. Same over here, not so much, but right up here. And then the only other thing is, there's this, you see around here, this is solid across here. And I just go ahead and eliminate this using the content aware on either that or the new AI eliminate that part of it. Other than that, it's a great shot.
And the artist is Patricia Levitin. Next is Wet Cyanotype 1.
It's a beautiful image. It's got an interesting green cast to it for a cyanotype, and I like the variety of that. And somehow some of the leaves ended up a little bit green, and then a lot of them are kind of a white silhouette. And I like the brush strokes around the edges, the blurriness, the speckles. It's all a rich image, came together nicely.
The artist is Ellen Davis. And last one is Majestic Mexican Equestrian.
Only a few more photos and we're done.
Just this one in this category, sorry. It's not the last one, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed the Photoshop treatment of this photo. It all works really well to give you a nice painterly quality, or at least a painted sensation, along with I like the composition and the balance of the tree, the horse rider, flowers, and the mission building. Seems like they pop out of the frame a bit. Nicely done.
And the artist is Jonathan Beth. Manipulated but realistic, just have a few here also. First one is Taiwan Temple.
So this one, just to say, should have been in the previous category in creative, because this is not realistic looking. Taking it it is a pretty intriguing image. I like all the waviness. I like the red pillars, posts. I would not have put the building on the left so close to the border, like creating more space there. So those are my comments for that one. It's just an interesting image.
And the artist is Ed Sylvester. Next is Another Time, Another Place.
I think the choice of a slower shutter speed adds to the sensation of motion in this photo, along with the different colors. And this mysterious object looks like some sort of an alien craft ready for takeoff, origin landing. And I love the gaze of just the little pop in the eyes of the person on the bike looking at the object. And I think it helps to create a sense of story, as well as, this star almost looking like it's taking off. Nicely done.
And the artist is Ellen Davis. And we have Eons of Water Polishing Rock.
Well, this looks different on the screen now. On my monitor, the water was considerably darker than the rock in the center, which I thought was an interesting statement to make. The rock in the center has lots of color and interesting reflections in it. And I'm pretty sure that's what the artist was after. So let's give him credit for that, even though it doesn't show strongly on this projection. So I like the photo in that way, that the rock is really interesting. And having the water around the site be secondary, that's pretty unusual the way we do things. And just as a side note, I rotated this one to the so that the right edge became the top of the picture, and it makes a really great abstract that way. So I might recommend playing with that. And then I would crop a little off the left border if it stays this way. I think that makes the statement in the middle even stronger.
And the artist is Jim Fair. For black and white, we just have one entry, and it's Phillips Gulch Falls.
Hey, only 3 more images each of us. This is a very good black and white. I love the diagonal elements from here and here. This triangular shape that was formed gives a nice sense of balance and structure. I like the slow shutter, giving the waterfall that softness. I think that had a lot of depth with a strong foreground going over to the background.
It was really good tonal development and balance, very nicely done.
And our artist is Mike Shea. All right, just 2 categories left. We have color, starting with a splash of color.
This one's cool because the splash is lit up and everything else is a little darker. I really like that. The splash does have some totally sharp focus. It's at the back half of the splash. If the photographer had been able to get the front half of the splash in focus instead, I think you'd really have a stunning photo. But this one works pretty well, even though, because you still see the focus in some of the water droplets there. And I like the way it kind of naturally vignettes itself. Nice.
The artist is Jim Baird. Next is Serene Day at Duval.
So this is a beautiful capture of this lake in Western Ireland. The exquisite light on the lake is even made more beautiful by the very long shutter exposure, giving it a nice softness, and then balances very nicely against the muted colors of the tree on the right, with just a hint of in the back here of light opening up at the end of the lake. The quietness of this photo, I think, makes this the masterpiece. I've seen many shots of Duloc. I have shots of this myself, but this is by far the best one. Great photo.
Artist is Bill Wages. Next is Reincarnation.
Very nice photo. I'm wondering if the photographer had to take out any color anywhere else in this photo. I've seen scenes where they really look black and white, and that flash really just makes it magical and adds another dimension. And I like the choice of framing. I think that was nicely done too. Good job.
Artist is Chris Schiller. And last one in the category is River Floating with Colors.
I think this was really a simple but effective use in color in this minimalist photo. On my monitor, the leaf had more color pop to it, but be that as it may, I think, you know, they're nice and soft colors and muted, and the back, it pops out because the background around it is so neutral. Not a void, but enough to let you appreciate the lone leaf.
The artist is Jonathan Beck. And finally, our phone category, we just have the one, and it's Through the Keyhole.
I think this photo is well done. It stands on its own. It was perfect for a phone. The geology is what is fascinating about this picture, and the photographer represented it well, let it speak for itself. It's nicely done.
And that concludes our critique and evening.
And who was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dave McClellan. Dave, I'm sorry. That concludes our evening. Thank you to our critiquers again. Is their subjective opinion, as David said, that they thank them for the great job they did, and thank you all.
Nice job.
Yeah, and I would like to thank the audiovisual folks.
Oh, yeah.
Greg, David, George.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. You know, it's a handful, you guys got it done, like, thank you. And next month is going to be an in-person meeting, and we really need a lot of people to show up because we're going to be voting on a few things.
Hey,
and,
When you're showing up for this direction, that little
we need
board
to
is
have the
right
right
at the
number.
top. There's some way to send out.
Oh,
I'd say
this thing here.
It's putting that little.
Yeah.
Because I know.
We've played with that. We don't know how to turn that thing off.
what?
The
Oh, yeah,
multi.
I asked,